towards Ukraine was a victory they hoped to bring to the electorate before the European elections. But of course it failed because it wasn't a realistic plan. It was largely voluntary, based on some dreams and political ambition. So when the reality came and Yanukovych took a step which was the only possible step, we see now the same step took new leaders, because economically you can't integrate a country of 45 million people with 30 million debt overnight. So it is a traditional approach, because Europe still is needed. It's needed of this image of enemy, of Russian bear, because it's much easier to talk about the situation of conflict and crisis created by Russians than to resolve the problem of 25 million of European unemployed.
Russia's move to incorporate Crimea has triggered a verbal fight in the UN Security Council, where the US envoy attacked the Russian ambassador, berating Moscow and going as far as calling it a thief.
Russia is known for its literary greatness, and what you just heard from the Russian ambassador showed more imagination than Tolstoy or Chekhov. A thief can steal property, but that does not confer the right of ownership on the thief.
During our discussions today, some of my colleagues used excessive language, particularly the US ambassador, Ms. Power, who started by mentioning Tolstoy and Chekhov but ended at the level of the tabloids. Such insults concerning Russia are absolutely unacceptable. That should be clear to Ms. Power. That's if the US delegation expects to cooperate with Russia in the Security Council on other issues in the future.
We've got more on the situation in Ukraine later in the programme here on RT International, including a look at some of those now rising to power in Kiev and their unconventional methods of doing politics. First to Spain. What started off as a peaceful rally, seeing thousands march to Madrid from all across the country, turned into violence on the streets of the capital. Protesters, angry at staggering unemployment rates and ongoing austerity cuts, attacked police. It ended in dozens of injuries and arrests. Our correspondent Igor Piskunov witnessed the clashes.
It was a peaceful protest rally throughout basically the entire time until the end, when it was coming to an end, and then suddenly a group of the young radical protesters with their face covered started throwing stones at the police. The police, who've had a perimeter there, they started pressing the protesters away from it, and then we've seen firecrackers being fired at the police and reportedly rubber bullets being fired back. As a result, there are injuries on both sides. We've been actually following these protesters for a few days now, and everyone that I spoke to, especially the older protesters, they told me that there may be some problems with the police when it comes to the younger protesters, the younger activists. They did expect some sort of problems could happen, and apparently that's what's happened here. They are strongly critical against the government's policies, especially economic policies, since the Spanish economy is going through severe problems. Unemployment stands at around 26%, which means that the only other EU state with more serious problems in that sense is Greece. After Greece comes Spain. But when it comes to the youth, 50%, around 50% of all the youth in Spain don't have a job. Also, around 2 million Spaniards are really dependent on state pensions and food banks and so on, which is also applying additional pressure on the economy. At the same time, the troika of the international creditors and Brussels, they are calling for more job cuts, for more reductions of salaries, and at the same time, they're not promising any improvement with the economy in the next 4 years, which obviously is only aggravating the situation and is even making these thousands of people more angry.
Well, before the protesters ended up in Madrid, they had covered hundreds of kilometres on foot on the so-called March of Dignity. Igor had a chance to walk with people who told him why they felt they had to undertake this long journey.
Hello, sir. Why are you here?
Why am I here? I'm sick of this government, with all the promises they never fulfill. They said they were going to create more jobs and lower the taxes, but it's a lie. Instead, unemployment rose from 4 to 6 million. This is the only way we can fight back.
We're exhausted after 12 days of walking. It's cold at night and hot during the day, but we're in high spirits. We have to put an end to these savage policies.
What caused you to take part in this march?
There are too many reasons. My sons have to work every day from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening only for 400 euros per month. Also, I'm a teacher, and I know what cuts in the public sector mean. All these evictions, this is insane. I'm marching to Madrid because I can't walk to Berlin or Brussels. We must stop them and the Troika.
Well, we can now talk to Clara Valverde. She's a Spanish writer and activist. Clara, the government has said just this month that the country is now out of recession and there are indeed small signs of economic recovery. Do you share that optimism?
Well, I don't share the facts. That's really good propaganda on their part. But the reality is the only thing that's gone up is the gross national product has gone up maybe 1 or 2%, which means that the banks are making more money and the big companies, but I mean, look out my window. The homeless are everywhere. People are hungry. People don't have jobs. So this is not true.
Well, we've seen austerity protests, of course, there in your country and throughout hard-hit European countries. Are these protests, though, really making any difference? The government seem to just want to continue with their austerity processes.
Well, the question is, what would happen if we didn't do it? If for one day we stopped our protests and our occupations, they would take everything away from us. They've already taken a lot, but they would take everything else. And it's our responsibility to our grandchildren to at least try to stop, at least to try to keep some of what our grandparents and our parents fought for. I think it's our responsibility. And of course it does work, because we see they haven't taken everything else away like they would really like to.
But the country's got to get out of debt, hasn't it? And surely that's something your future grandchildren have got to think about as well. What is the alternative apart from these methods?
The debt? Who says we have to pay the debt? I mean, that's a myth. Look at Argentina didn't stop paying its debt, and it got out of the situation. Ecuador is only paying part of the debt, the part that they think makes sense, because most of the debt is not our debt. It belongs to the banks. So I think that they should stop taking our tax money to pay their debt.
Austerity seems to be working for the UK, though, doesn't it? Isn't it just a case of you being patient?
The UK? I mean, I'm really concerned about your sources. When I read this question, I thought, what is this? I mean, have you gone to the sources? Have you read I mean, you just have to read the book Austerity Kills, or watch the film The Spirit of 45. Okay, just some facts. I mean, I'm not an expert on the UK, but until 2010, suicide was going down in England, homelessness was going down, the national healthcare system was starting to work pretty well. And since 2010, that spike. I mean, ask the people in Yorkshire and in Humber. I mean, the austerity is killing England.
Well, there are predictions it's going to be the fastest growing economy, of course, in the world's economies in the next 2 or 3 years. So the indications are there that it seems to be working. Now, why not for Spain? Can't they pursue the same sort of...
Yep. But when you say economy works, for whom are you talking about? You're talking about, the big companies, the banks. That's not people, I mean, they're rescuing people, not banks, not people, The people in England, ask them, read the facts, And I mean, ask the people who are working in the hospitals. I have a lot of my ex-students who had to leave Spain, obviously, who are nursing students, and it's falling apart. The national healthcare system is falling apart because of the cutbacks. So when you say the economy, who does it mean? It doesn't mean the people.
Clara, really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Clara Valverde, writer and activist, live here on RT International. Thank you. Well, more news and analysis on Ukraine, including the rise of the radical elements in the country. That's still ahead for you after a short break. This is The Weekly.